Hey you guys, I wanted to pop on and briefly record a video talking about the 3 best fantasy standalone books that I've read so far this year in 2019. The first one is A Brightness Long Ago by Guy Gavriel Kay, and this book is arguably about the intense rivalry between two mercenary captains in Renaissance Italy slightly before the fall of Constantinople. And the story is told through the eyes of our 3 main protagonists. We have Danio, and he is an old man looking back on his life and telling us the story of these 2 captains. We also have Adria, and she is a young noblewoman who wants to make her own way in the world and is rejecting her family's wishes for her. And we also have Yelena, and she is a Jewish healer who has the ability to see the souls of the recently departed. The story opens from Daniel's perspective, and he is serving at the court of a duke known as the Beast. And his kind of story cross paths with Adria, who is this young noblewoman who's come to the court to be led into the Beast chambers as a disposable whore for the night. And her intent is to kill him and rid his people of this kind of tyrant. That's how the story begins, and Daniel helps her escape, and in her escape she is wounded and ends up taking refuge with the healer Yelena. From there, the story really kind of hinges on chance and fortune's wheel, and how these kind of brief different encounters result in the trajectory of someone's life totally changing. And so through the eyes of these 3 protagonists, we get the story of these 2 rival mercenary captains. The story of this rivalry is loosely based on 2 captains named Federico Montefeltro and Sigismondo Malatesta. And these 2 men have this intense hatred for each other, but they also really respect each other and are kind of irrevocably drawn towards one another. And that stems from this kind of event in their past and how it completely changed the way that these 2 men see each other. Now, I was listening to this book while driving through the Scottish Highlands, looking out the window and crying because that's just how beautiful the story was. Kay's writing is beautiful as always. His character work is absolutely fantastic. And the plot, while totally character-driven, is actually very intriguing in a way. I highly recommend this for anyone who wants to read some incredibly beautiful writing. I would recommend this book for anyone who's into historical fiction with a touch of fantasy, or just beautiful writing in general. Now, the second book that I want to talk about is Middlegame by Seanan McGuire. It's a bit of a weird metaphysical book, and the story is about these 2 twins named Roger and Dodger, kind of an awful name. And it starts maybe like 200 years ago, sometime in the 1800s, with a woman named Asphodel Deborah Baker, and she is this absolutely brilliant alchemist, the premier alchemist of her age, of her era. And she has this plan to split up the physical laws of the universe in 2 and somehow embody them in the bodies of twins. And so she quite literally creates a man to be servant and help her with this project. Now, fast forward to present day, and this man she's created, Reed, has killed Asphodel and is running the project / experiment on his own. And it seems that he succeeded in embodying kind of the mathematical side of the universe and the linguistic, more informational side of the universe into 2 twins. The story from there begins with Roger, and he's about, I think, 8 years old, and he is struggling horribly to do his math homework when suddenly he hears the voice of this girl in his head, and she's calling him stupid for not knowing how to multiply correctly. And the 2 of them help with one another's homework as they grow up, and the story sees these 2 twins kind of drawn together and torn apart multiple times throughout the story. It's a very, very odd book. I think it's pretty whimsical too, though, at the same time. Something that I really liked about this story is that the character Asphodel has written a kind of children's book, in-universe fictional children's book that is about two wayward children who are going on this adventure along what's called the Improbable Road. And it seems like this children's book has some kind of basis in alchemy and is almost like a guide or a map or something, a diagram of the alchemical world. What's actually interesting is I saw that Shauna Maguire's agent called her up and asked her if she would be willing to write the story of these two wayward children, Avery and Zid, as a wayward children's book, and she said that she has actually already written it, that it was written before she even began Middlegame. And so I'm curious to see how that's going to be published. It might be published by Deborah A. Baker, since that's actually a pen name of Shauna Maguire's, or it might be published as a wayward children's novel. And I'm not sure which they'll really go with. Probably Shauna Maguire, because Deborah A. Baker only has a few books out, and the two of them that I read earlier this year weren't actually very good. So I assume it'll be a wayward children's book. But I'm really excited to see either way. And the last book that I wanted to talk about is Cage of Souls by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is a really cool book. It takes place far, far, far in the future in a world that has been completely decimated by humanity's actions and nature's vengeance, I guess you would say. The sea has been poisoned and nothing really lives there. Nothing really lives anywhere, honestly. Shadrapar is the last bastion of humanity, and it's the single city in the world with anyone left alive. And the city houses, I think, 100,000 people. And the story is about this man named Stefan Bani, and it opens with him. He's being taken to a floating kind of island of prison, and we don't know what crime he's been found guilty of, but he arrives there and is immediately subjected to some really horrible treatment. Now, the book is told in 5 different parts, with part 2 and part 4 actually going back in time. In these 2 parts, we see him venture out into the desert to collect some rare items. We see him in the undercity of Shadrapar, which is this warren of tunnels and mazes and whatnot. And then in the 3 other parts, we see him present day as he is surviving in prison with some very crazy characters. You see him make his way through this post-apocalyptic type world, and the story is neither fantasy or sci-fi. I would call it a mix of the two. It feels more like a fantasy story, but it takes place, like I said, far in the future, and there are definitely some sci-fi elements in terms of the weaponry and almost force fields and whatnot. If there's one book that I think you guys should read, it would definitely be this one, Cage of Souls. This is a super, super cool book, and I think that it's great for anyone who wants to see some fantastic character work and some sci-fi, some sci-fantasy element. Adrian Tchaikovsky is a really great author. He has another very cool book called Children of Time, and Children of Ruin came out earlier this year as well. There's nothing in Cage of Souls that I didn't like. The only thing I can really think of is this one instance where we're told that one of the characters that Stefan's been running with is actually a Soviet time traveler from 1974 who's just woken up far, far, far in the future and has no idea what's going on. But even that was kind of funny, and it definitely kind of drove home the way that the world's changed in all this time, and the way that humanity's effects have in turn created nature as this kind of enemy that has its own effects on humanity in turn. We see some very cool evolutionary options that have been taken, and overall the book is just fantastic, and I think all of you need to read it because it's going to be criminally underread. I can almost guarantee that. So those are the 3 best standalones that I've read so far in 2019, so I hope you enjoyed, and be sure to check them all out. Thanks.